In 1960, I was a senior in high school in North Carolina. Pretty geeky looking, huh? At that time, I didn't have any idea. You can take the slide down, Wally. At that time, I didn't have any idea that there were a bunch of determined Methodists in Arizona building a new church way out in the middle of nowhere that eventually would become our church home in the decades to come. Sue Ellen and I married in a Methodist church in 1965, and in 1970 we moved to Arizona, and in 1977 we built a house just 3 blocks from here. Well, by then, Pastor Dale Smith's early efforts had really started a great church. By then, when we moved here in 1977, the church had an exciting and growing congregation. Now imagine, if you will, building a church in the middle of nowhere in the 1960s. It was a time when our country was going through a great deal of turmoil. Now, the church met originally, of all places, in a movie studio. It's called Cudia City, and it was considered way on the outskirts of Phoenix. That's 40th Street and Camelback now. The sound stage was so cold that the members wanted a warmer place to meet. So they talked themselves into a resort called Paradise Inn, which is now where the Phoenician sits. Nice place to meet temporarily, but the members early on said, we got to have our own place. So what they did was they bought somewhere in excess of 15 acres. I'm not getting into that debate. Ground was broken and construction began. Now, today's chapel was the original sanctuary for the church. And you'll notice the distinctive chalice-shaped stained glass window. That famous, distinctive look has become our church's symbol. The new chapel was soon surrounded by a beautiful biblical garden, and it attracted so much attention, Arizona Highways featured the new chapel and gardens in their magazine. It brought us a lot of early attention, and we started having sunrise services for Easter in the biblical garden. Now, in 1977, when Sue Ellen and I moved down the street about 3 blocks here in the neighborhood, we didn't choose this church just because it was the closest church. However, that is a nice feature. There were several things that led us to choose this church. First, there was the warm welcome we received from everybody. And then there was that pastor, Don Sapp. I love that 70s hairdo. If we're going to do my high school picture, we have to do a 70s hairdo of Don Sapp. But the thing about Don Sapp is he is the first preacher I ever saw who got in front of the congregation, preached for 20 minutes without referring to a single note. It was spectacular. We were very, very impressed. And over these 33 years since we joined, our 2 daughters have attended preschool, Sunday school, and youth programs. And even now, our 3 Phoenix grandchildren have gone through PVUMC preschool, which was started in 1966 and is considered one of the very best preschools in the valley. During the 60s and 70s, the church members filled food boxes with items for the needy, sent mission teams to Mexico, collected back-to-school gifts for children, and the church really made an impact in the community. Worship and music filled the sanctuary as our choirs began to grow, and soon an adult choir of 40 started a wonderful tradition of presenting Handel's Messiah at Christmas time. By the end of the church's first 2 decades, Paradise Valley United Methodist Church was over 1,000 strong. Our light was burning brightly.
You talk about a photo. Tom, how come you don't have a hat on? That's the question. Well, in 1978, the Hobbs family journey began with Paradise Valley United Methodist Church, with my parents, Karen and Bob Hobbs Sr., becoming members. And being a third-generation native of Phoenix myself, I wasn't too far behind, as in 1984, after shortly finishing my confirmation, I was able to join the church as well. And by the way, 1984 was the same time that our wonderful, good-looking young man, Bob Stanley, became our senior pastor here at the church. Now, believe it or not, one of the things I remember most about growing up here in the PVUMC family was not going to Bible study, was not going to the classes, was not going to Sunday school. It was going out and collecting tadpoles in the pools of water of what is now the beautiful biblical garden. You probably find that hard to believe. Another thing I enjoyed doing with my friends is playing hide and go seek. And there were a lot of great places down there, obviously being the garden, but my favorite spot was what? The prayer room. And nobody would find me ever, because who as a kid would ever go in the prayer room? Well, the light certainly shined upon the mountains and continued to shine this during the 80s and 90s as we added lay readers and literists became part of the Sunday morning services. Now, during this same time, membership grew to almost 1,800 people, which is fantastic. And what does that mean? It means it was very hard to come by seats in this beautiful facility. Lots of seats were occupied. It also meant that the Sunday school services were occupied as well. Now, during the same time, we were able to take on a wonderful educational facility and begin to go through a renovation of our fellowship center, which is now the church library. And I will tell you this, those of you who've been here, I've had more spaghetti dinners in that fellowship center that was once there, right? I had a lot of spaghetti dinners there, so bring back some great memories. Well, next came the groundbreaking for what is now known as this beautiful sanctuary we're in today. And I vividly remember Bob Stanley giving the very first leadership or very first service here in front of us all for Christmas Eve. Talk about a spectacular experience for some of us. Well, during this time, mission events were expanded as well, with projects at places like UMOM, the Wesley Community Center, and we began to really reach out to different places of the world and send groups through all out the world with people in need. Well, shortly after my college years, or my days at Arizona State, we had another wonderfully looking young man in Fred Trevino join our church as the senior pastor. And in addition to watching Fred celebrate 5 Christmas services up here, which was a great blessing, I am very proud to say that we were able to have Fred at our presence and our wedding where he presided over Michelle and I in 1997. It was during these same years that we supported a new church in Fountain Hills and started satellite services in Carefree, which has now become the Desert Mission United Methodist Church. And then as the 20th century came to a close, we brought in another wonderful person, in John Blackwell, who, although had lots of responsibilities, was here to help us shift from a small to what is now a very large and successful church. Well, most certainly, the light upon the mountain is shone brightly.
There's a light upon the mountain.
My time here at PVUMC began as a 1-year-old in the nursery, while my older sister attended preschool here and my mother was in a Bible study. So I've grown up here. I've attended Sunday school here since before I can remember. I've also gone through faith quakes, took my confirmation journey here, and attended Vacation Bible Camp. I spent every summer of my elementary school years up on Mingus Mountain at Camp Narnia, growing closer to my old friends and making new ones, enjoying the beautiful setting and the weather, and exploring a little bit more into my still young faith. After I entered high school, this church gave me the opportunity to do what I love most, which is performing, through singing with the youth choir and the youth praise band Sing to Him, as well as performing in the on-campus productions of The Music Man and Godspell. This place was a home to me, somewhere where I could go to feel safe, which is especially important in times of crisis. I was trying to figure out if my uncle, who worked in one of the Twin Towers, had gotten home safely. I remember seeing footage on the TV and thinking it was just another movie. There was a prayer service in the chapel that night where we could gather together and try to make some sense of what had happened, try to gather faith and strength from God and from each other. Doug Norris had just finished his brief but effective time here as our senior pastor, and Kelly Bender had only been here for a couple of weeks. There was a light upon the mountain that night, but it was hard for us to see it through our tears. The world was different after that day, even for us kids. But here we felt safe. Here was a place where we could come to learn about God and his purpose for us from our church family, bringing us hope and faith despite the turmoil of the outside world. And so the church continued to minister. Open Table was launched, a labyrinth was laid, the biblical garden was reborn, the sanctuary pipe organ arrived, and the Hobbs Family Learning Center was completed. Mission teams, both youth and adult, have continued to serve our hurting world. I myself have traveled to the Gulf Coast twice following destructive hurricanes, rebuilding homes in Mississippi and Louisiana. I've also traveled to Tucson to learn about immigration issues, and Denver, where we worked with the homeless population living in the city. On each of these trips, all of the youth and adults were touched by the heartbreaking and poignant stories of the people we met, but also by their enduring faith, the single thing that pulled them through despite all the hardships life had thrown at them. Other mission teams have traveled to Central and South America, and local mission opportunities have included paint-a-thons, Habitat for Humanity building, monthly food collections, and UMCOR emergency kit assembly, as well as much, much more. You, our church family, have given us a place where we can come to learn how to worship, to learn how to serve others, a place where we can come and leave and go out into the world and live God's word and be the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. That light on the mountain, it's always there, showing us the way home. That's why honoring our past and creating our future means so very much.